The night Will Spencer first noticed the shape of a person curled inside the back seat of a car, half hidden behind fogged windows and the shadows of a dimly lit parking lot. He did not expect it to pull him into the darkest chapter of the Logan War. He had left Spencer Publications late, his mind weighed down by the emotional destruction unfolding between the Logan sisters, unaware that a new fracture was waiting just beyond the edge of his headlights. The city was quiet at that hour, wrapped in a stillness that often disguises desperation, and yet something about the abandoned-looking vehicle drew him closer, as though instinct guided him toward a secret destined to change everything. When Will peered inside, he expected to see a stranger. Instead, he found Dylan tired, gaunt, and wrapped in layers of clothing that failed to shield her from the cold Los Angeles night. Her posture was defensive even in sleep, curled tightly as though afraid the world might take more than it already had. Will had known her casually, the young woman who once worked on small projects for Spencer, never fully in the spotlight but always in motion on the periphery. The sight of her stripped down to vulnerability pierced something in him, the kind of ache that arises when someone realizes the world can crush even the brightest spirits when no one is watching. Electra, who had been waiting for him in the passenger seat, stepped beside him and saw the same haunting truth. Dylan was not simply unlucky, she was broken. There was a heaviness around her, a tension in the air that suggested her homelessness was not merely an issue of finances, but of fear. Will felt an urgency to act not out of pity, but out of recognition. He had seen enough destruction within his own family to understand what it meant for someone to slip through society's cracks. When they woke her gently, Dylan's eyes opened with the weary look of someone expecting danger rather than help. She tried to brush off their concern, claiming she was fine, insisting she only needed a few days to figure things out, but everything about her shaking hands. The exhaustion etched into her skin exposed the lie. Will's chest tightened with guilt, wondering how long she had been suffering within the orbit of his world without anyone noticing. Electra, more intuitive than she often received credit for, sensed something deeper as well. The way Dylan glanced over her shoulder, the way she flinched at unexpected sounds, the fact that she kept checking her phone even though it was powered off, it all hinted at a threat far more terrifying than simple poverty. They convinced her to join them for a warm meal, and though Dylan reluctantly accepted, she remained tense, constantly scanning her surroundings. Will noticed how she avoided brightly lit areas, how she instinctively positioned herself with her back toward walls, how her body stiffened each time someone walked nearby. He felt a creeping dread bloom inside him, the kind that arrives when the truth is close but refuses to reveal itself. Electra watched silently, knowing that trauma always leaves traces, and the ones Dylan carried pulsed like open wounds. It wasn't until the evening wore on that Dylan's guarded expression cracked. When Will offered her a place to stay just for the night, just to rest, she looked at him with a mixture of desperation and terror, as though she wanted safety but feared that accepting it would put him in danger too. That hesitation revealed more than words ever could. She finally agreed, but only after extracting a promise. If anything happened, anything strange, unexpected, or dangerous, Will and Electra would not involve the police. The request was chilling in its specificity. As night settled over the Spencer home, Electra watched Dylan gently fold her only possessions, a faded backpack, a change of clothes, a journal she kept close as if it were a lifeline. The girl moved with quiet precision, like someone trained to disappear. Will's protective instincts sharpened. He felt the edges of a story forming, one too dark and deliberate to be coincidence. Meanwhile, outside their walls, Los Angeles glittered with the chaos of the Logan scandal. Brooke's retaliation against Katie had sent shockwaves through the industry, igniting a war of influence and identity. Bill was preparing his next counterstrike, Ridge was gathering defenses, and Katie was struggling to hold herself together under the weight of Brooke's newest betrayal. But as the battle between them escalated, none of them realized that a separate shadow, older, darker, and far more dangerous, was creeping back into the city. That shadow had a name, and its name was buried deep within Dylan's fear. As Dylan finally drifted into uneasy sleep, Will remained awake, replaying every detail of the evening. He sensed that whatever she was running from wasn't simply a debt collector or an ex-boyfriend. There was calculation in her fear, organized panic, the kind someone develops only when running from a threat capable of destroying lives. Will felt a chill as he remembered the intensity in her eyes when she said the police couldn't be involved. That kind of warning didn't come from petty crime, it came from survival. Electra curled beside him, whispering her growing suspicion that Dylan's situation was somehow tied to the chaos brewing between the Logans. Will laughed at first what could possibly connect a homeless young woman to one of the most powerful fashion families in Los Angeles. But the more he thought about it, the more he recognized a familiar pattern. Secrets always circle back to the people who hide the most. And the Logans had been hiding far more than the public knew. The scandal over the Logan trademark had exposed fractures, but beneath those fractures lay buried truths, unresolved betrayals, and decades-old wounds. Secrets like that often attract the kinds of people who thrive in darkness. Will couldn't shake the thought that perhaps Dylan wasn't merely unlucky, perhaps she had stumbled into something she was never supposed to see. The next morning, Will woke to the sound of Dylan whispering into her journal with trembling hands. She wasn't writing parables or poetry, she was recording evidence. Words like proof, cover-up, and don't let them find me jumped out in sharp, frantic handwriting. Will felt his heart seize. He finally asked the question he feared most. Who are you hiding from? Dylan froze. Her lips trembled. Her eyes filled with terror. And then she whispered a single name. A name that sent a cold ripple through Will because of everything that name represented. Luna. The same Luna whose disappearance had been clouded by rumor. The same Luna whose tangled history with Bill, Katie, and Spencer publications had fueled scandals for years. The same Luna whose death had never quite felt final. The same Luna whose grudges ran deep enough to reshape destines. Will felt the atmosphere shift around him. Everything inside him tightened with dread. Because if Dylan was running from Luna, it meant one terrifying truth. Luna was alive. And she was back. And she was hunting someone connected to the Logan War. Electra pressed Dylan gently, trying to understand. Dylan finally revealed that she had been working indirectly for someone tied to Brooke's newest fashion launch, someone who had access to confidential files. Someone who handled private correspondence. Someone who should never have been exposed to the fallout of a long-buried secret. But she had seen something she wasn't supposed to see. Something large enough to ruin not just Brooke, but the entire Logan empire. A cover-up. A buried scandal. A document hidden years ago. Dylan discovered it by accident, and Luna wanted it back. Dylan's homelessness wasn't misfortune, it was escape. She had abandoned her apartment, her job, her phone, everything tied to her identity. She believed that the further she got from the Logan orbit, the safer she might be. But Luna had found her once already, cornering her in a parking structure, whispering threats that clung to her like poison. Dylan survived that night only by sheer instinct. She had fled, disappearing into the cracks of the city, but Luna was patient, vengeful, and relentless. And now Dylan had revealed the most chilling part. What she found was not merely evidence of a scandal. It was proof of a decades-long cover-up that predated the Logan trademark war. A link between Luna's past downfall and a Logan decision made in secret, one that had destroyed Luna's life forever. What Dylan carried inside her journal was the one loose thread capable of bringing everything to light, which meant Luna would never stop hunting her. When Will processed everything, he looked at Dylan with a new understanding. She wasn't weak, she was brave. She wasn't broken, she was in hiding. And her entire world had collapsed because she had stepped on a truth powerful enough to ignite a war far deadlier than Brooke versus Katie. Electra trembled as she asked the most important question of all. If Luna had returned, what did she want? Dylan's answer was chilling. Luna didn't want revenge. She wanted resurrection. She wanted her name back. She wanted the world to remember what the Logans took from her. And the Logan scandal currently destroying Katie and Brooke. It was only the beginning. The true war was just waking. The final day of the year arrived not with celebration, but with a tension that vibrated through Los Angeles like a held breath waiting to break. Beneath the glittering facade of the fashion world, where cameras flashed and reputations gleamed, the Logan sisters stood at the edge of a storm that none of them could stop. It had begun with a technical oversight, a simple lapse involving the expiration of a trademark. Yet in the world of Forrester Creations, a single oversight had the power to split families, ignite professional warfare, and expose long-hidden resentments that had quietly burned beneath the surface for decades. The Logan name, once a banner of feminine strength and unity, had become the epicenter of a battle that was about to turn devastatingly personal. Katie Logan Spencer had never sought power for its own sake. She had lived years in the shadow of her older sisters, often taking the quieter road, the steadier path, the one where she sacrificed her own needs for the emotional peace of the family. Yet when she discovered the Logan trademark had expired, a symbol that had defined not only a fashion line, but a legacy, she stepped forward with a resolve she had not expected. Liam Spencer's determination to support her had strengthened her in ways she did not realize she needed, and when he succeeded in registering the Logan name under Katie's ownership, a new world opened before her. For the first time, she felt the possibility of building something for herself, something not overshadowed by Brooke's brilliance or Ridge's influence. The sense of triumph was brief. Brooke Logan Forrester and Ridge Forrester viewed the situation through an entirely different lens. To them, the loss of the trademark was not merely an administrative mistake. It was a betrayal. An act of opportunism by a sister who should have safeguarded their shared legacy instead of claiming it. Brooke had built her life around reinvention and reclaiming status whenever it slipped through her fingers. She believed that anything bearing the Logan name belonged to her naturally, emotionally, historically, and professionally. So when she learned that Katie now legally controlled the brand, she felt not only shocked but replaced, as though her identity had been snatched from her hands. But what Brooke refused to acknowledge was the truth at the heart of Katie's actions. The trademark had expired because Brooke and Ridge had allowed it to expire. They had not renewed it, not protected it, not prioritized it. And Katie, seeing an opportunity to preserve the family name, had acted. Yet to Brooke, logic mattered far less than pride, and pride, once wounded, became a sharp and dangerous thing. The confrontation between the sisters had been inevitable. Brooke, fueled by a lifetime of believing that leadership of the Logan legacy was her birthright, sought Katie out with indignation burning beneath her composed exterior. Katie, who had entered the conversation prepared to defend her actions with grace, found herself trapped in a rising storm of accusation. She had expected disappointment, maybe anger, but she had not expected Brooke to twist the situation into a narrative of seduction and possessiveness, insinuating that Katie's motivations were fueled by her inability to control the men who had once loved Brooke more. That accusation pierced deeper than any business dispute. For years, Katie had endured the brutal pain of loving a man, Bill Spencer, who had repeatedly fallen back into Brooke's gravitational pull. Katie had forgiven, healed, and rebuilt pieces of herself after every betrayal. But Brooke's implication that Katie's decision about the trademark was rooted in jealousy triggered old wounds she thought had finally scarred over. The shock of it left her breathless. It was not the accusation itself that hurt the most. It was the realization that Brooke had never truly understood how deeply those betrayals had shaped Katie's sense of self. As Katie walked away from the confrontation, trembling with fury and heartbreak, Bill stepped into the storm with the fierce protectiveness that had once defined the most complicated chapters of their relationship. He had always loved Katie in his own flawed, intense way, even when he lost sight of her, even when he caused her pain. Seeing her shattered by Brooke reignited a fire within him, a fire that Ridge's arrogance and Brooke's entitlement only intensified. Bill had already been simmering with anger, and the thought of Ridge standing behind Brooke's verbal attacks was enough to ignite him into action. While Bill prepared for confrontation, Brooke retreated behind a mask of elegance and calculation. Her anger did not erupt outward immediately. Instead, it crystallized into a quiet, poisonous resolve. The trademark might belong to Katie, but Brooke still possessed something far more powerful: fame, influence, and the ability to command attention with a single strategic move. She knew how the industry worked. She knew that perception could shape reality long before legal paperwork did. And so she began crafting her retaliation, one that cut not through the law, but through the hearts of those who dared to oppose her. The plan was simple in structure, but devastating in intention. Brooke would reclaim the spotlight in a way no one could overshadow. She would launch a new line of high-profile fashion collection built around her full name, Brooke Logan. Every headline, every social media post, every whispered conversation would say the same thing. Brooke is the true face of the Logan legacy. It was not merely business, it was psychological warfare. By elevating her own personal brand, Brooke would suffocate Katie's fledgling project before it took its first breath. In Brooke's mind, this was not cruelty, it was justice. She saw herself as reclaiming what should never have been lost. She saw Katie's ownership as a temporary disruption, one she could overpower with enough influence and public attention. But beneath her polished exterior, something darker pulsed: fear. Fear of aging, fear of losing relevance, fear of being replaced not by a rival, but by her own sister. Brooke had spent her life surviving emotional upheavals, romantic entanglements, and public scandals. Reinvention was her survival mechanism. And so the retaliation she crafted was not merely strategic, it was the instinctive act of a woman fighting to keep her crown. Katie, unaware of the specifics but painfully attuned to the tension gathering around her, sensed a storm approaching. Her heart raced with the knowledge that Brooke was planning something, and not the kind of reconciliation Katie had hoped for in weaker moments. She felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her, threatening to buckle her resolve. She had wanted to protect the Logan legacy, not ignite a war. But as she replayed Brooke's cruel insinuations, her fear gradually hardened into strength. Katie realized that standing her ground meant embracing conflict, something she had spent much of her life avoiding. Yet this time, retreat would mean erasing herself again, and she refused to vanish behind her sister one more time. When Brooke finally moved, she moved with precision. The announcement swept across the fashion world like a seismic shock. Headlines burst with excitement. Brooke Logan unveils groundbreaking new collection. Interviews, press releases, and bold promotional imagery flooded the media, each one centering Brooke as the embodiment of the Logan name. The public reacted with enthusiasm, dazzled by the familiar glamour, unaware of the emotional carnage raging beneath the surface. Katie saw the news and felt the air leave her lungs. She understood immediately what Brooke intended: not merely competition, but domination. The move was designed to eclipse her before she even launched. It was a message written not in words, but in spotlight. You may own the trademark, but I am the Logan the world follows. The betrayal cut deeper than any business maneuver. Katie felt her world tilting as fury and heartbreak surged inside her. This was not just professional sabotage. It was Brooke announcing to the world that Katie did not belong at the top, that Katie's vision was secondary, that Katie was the lesser Logan. It was a public erasure of everything Katie had fought to reclaim. Her emotional eruption was immediate. She found herself pacing, trembling, struggling to breathe through the intensity of her anger. For years she had defended Brooke, forgiven Brooke, believed in Brooke's inherent goodness despite countless wounds. Now, staring at the flashy promotional materials, Katie realized that Brooke had never seen her as an equal. Brooke's retaliation was the clearest proof that to her older sister, Katie's dreams were disposable. Katie turned to the only person she trusted to understand the complicated intersections of family loyalty, betrayal, and ambition: Bill. When she revealed everything, Bill's anger erupted with a ferocity that shook even her. He saw Brooke's actions not as business strategy, but as cruelty, the same self-centered cruelty that had once destroyed his marriage to Katie. And because Rich stood behind Brooke, not stopping her, not advising caution, but supporting her, Bill's fury found a secondary target. The coming confrontation was inevitable. While Bill prepared to unleash every ounce of his rage, Carter Walton watched the unfolding chaos with growing resentment. Carter, who had failed to renew the trademark, could not bring himself to accept responsibility. Guilt gnawed at him, but instead of facing it, he redirected his frustration toward Bill. In Carter's mind, Bill was the reason Katie and Brooke were finishing the year at war. Bill was the reason Ridge was furious, the reason the Logan legacy was collapsing into chaos. Carter convinced himself that this disaster was not the result of his own negligence, but of Bill's opportunism and emotional interference. But beneath Carter's deflection was fear. He had always prided himself on his integrity, his professionalism, his loyalty to the Forresters. And now, because of his mistake, a sisterhood was breaking apart, a legacy was sinking into scandal, and the company he loved faced internal fractures more dangerous than any public setback. Carter feared that Ridge might never forgive him, that Katie would never see him as an ally again, that Brooke would blame him privately even as she targeted Katie publicly. And so he clung to his anger at Bill because admitting the real cause of the chaos would mean confronting the possibility that Carter himself had failed the family he vowed to protect. Meanwhile, the media, unaware of the emotional war brewing behind the scenes, celebrated Brooke's announcement as a triumphant new chapter. No one outside the Logan circle understood that the glamorous headlines masked betrayal that would alter the family forever. No one saw the way Katie trembled with a mixture of heartbreak and determination. No one witnessed the rage building in Bill's chest like a brewing storm. And no one foresaw the collision that was about to explode between Bill and Ridge. A collision fueled by years of rivalry, pride, and unresolved grudges. What had started as a trademark dispute had evolved into something far more dangerous, a battle for identity, power, and emotional survival. Each character stood on a different edge of the same precipice, and the coming hours would determine not only the future of the Logan name, but the future of every relationship tied to it.